Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to just start by briefly introducing yourself and why you're running?
Yeah. I'm State Senator Mike Simmons, and I'm running for Congress in Illinois' ninth District. And I am running to bring an authentic voice to Congress for the ninth District at a time when it is desperately needed. Whether we're talking about the Trump administration targeting immigrant communities, people of color, LGBTQ people, those of the working class, those are all communities that have shaped who I am. And I am proud to be running as a candidate who can most effectively represent, authentically represent those communities.
Yeah, so this is the first time that the Ninth District is having an open, competitive primary in nearly 3 decades, having been represented by Jan Schakowsky. What specific lessons would you take from Schakowsky's tenure over those years? And is there anything that you would do differently from her, whether it's in policy or approach to being a congressperson?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the moment we're living in is really unique. And what I've often said on the campaign trail is whoever wins from the ninth district is going to have to punch above their weight. The job is not the same as it was 5, 10, or 20 years ago. The reality is that the reason I'm running for the seat is not just to be an authentic voice, but to stop fascism in its tracks, to stand up to Donald Trump, to ensure that all of his enablers in Congress are held accountable, and to bring to justice all of the injustice that we saw during Operation Midway Blitz. So those are a few things that have to be done literally right away. And I think that Jan Schakowsky has been a great progressive representative for our district. She's done great work. I am a progressive force in the state Senate where I've passed 50 bills in just actually 5 years a day. February 6, 2021, I took the oath of office and became a state senator. And then those 5 years, I've passed 50 bills into law. I know how to get things done, but I've also been a progressive force in the state Senate where I've used my voice to push back on hateful Republicans who have at times threatened trans families on the floor of the Senate where no one said anything and I was the only Democrat to push back. That's the type of energy we need in Congress right now. We got to do both.
Yeah, and the Ninth District is historically very progressive. The Democratic field that you're running with and against reflects this. There's not much immediate daylight between some of the candidates on the policies. What is a policy issue that you feel separates you out from the crowd?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the first thing I want to say is that people often say that there's not a lot of ideological daylight between the candidates. I don't think that's good enough because the reality is that in some instances, it's about the energy, the sense of urgency that you bring, and your direct connection to the issues that need advocacy. It's not going to be good enough for me. I'm certainly not happy with the next congressperson in the ninth district being somebody who goes to Washington and just votes the right way, puts out a press release, does 3 town halls a year, and calls it a day. That's not going to work. Um, I am somebody that will come in with direct lived experiences growing up in public housing in the ninth district, direct lived experiences being a child of small business owners who are being priced out of our communities right now. Myself being the first openly gay person to serve in Illinois Senate, where I would become the first openly LGBTQ person to represent any of Chicago in Congress. That's a whole different point of view and mindset and sense of urgency around the issues right now. And I think that alone cuts me apart from the competition. I would add that I put my record up against all of my opponents combined in terms of the breadth of the issues that I've passed bills on and the depth of advocacy on each of those bills and what it took to actually make them happen, such as the new child tax credit in Illinois, which is my first bill I introduced after I was sworn in, legislation that is now law that erases medical debt for 400,000 households. That was my bill. I worked on those bills because I grew up in a household where I watched my mother make undignified choices between healthcare and keeping the lights on in her salon in Rogers Park. Undignified decisions between being able to come to my track meets and watch me participate in after school activity or picking up extra hours as a cosmetologist. So those experiences are important right now in this country because the fight that is being waged on our communities by the Trump administration targets communities just like mine, and those are the people that make up the ninth district. So I think there's a bit of a different sort of foundation that comes into this that I think is really important in this climate that we're living in.
Yeah, so you're saying it's kind of more for you about approach than it is, you know, strict policy differences. Like there may be a lot of overlap, and if there is any issue that sets you apart, great. But you're saying really more about approach.
I think so. And let's also talk about how people are getting into these seats. So listen, people say about this field that we have a lot of candidates. And I'm proud that I am polling in the top 3 or 4. I think it's because I've been putting in the work. I've been campaigning since July 8th when I launched. I was the first candidate to pick up any endorsements out of McHenry County. I've got a diverse coalition of endorsers and community leaders all across the district that are backing my campaign. There are people in this race, and one of my opponents, Laura Fine, who we looked at her donors last week, and she has taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from some of the same donors who have given to Donald Trump, who have given to Speaker Mike Johnson, and who have given to Senator Ted Cruz. And what I have said is that these donors are not doing this out of goodwill. They're going to expect something in return. And that type of money and the way that it's coming into her campaign drowns out voices like mine in the communities across the Ninth District. And so it's really important to think about how are people actually getting into this role? How are they actually getting to Congress? And then what are we going to be able to expect from them? Because I don't know how you stand up to Republicans if they're funding your campaign.
So, speaking of which, coming into Congress, right now at least, the chamber is still controlled by Republicans. And you, if elected, you will also be working with and at times, dealing with members of your own party who may be ideologically very divergent from you. What is your approach to working with or dealing with both like Democrats that you don't align with and then Republicans in the chamber? And then how does that approach differ depending on whether the Democrats take back the House in the midterm elections overall this year?
Yeah, I mean, I just point to my time in the Illinois Senate where I've done two things that I think I don't see any candidate in this race who can say this. I have passed dozens of bills working with Republicans, working with moderate Democrats, by talking with them, by engaging with them. And two examples I like to talk about is in 2024, actually 2025, I passed a bill that puts Illinois on the path to setting limits on forever chemicals in our water supplies. And the reason I brought that bill forward is because I knew that Donald Trump was planning to gut the EPA, which he did in April of last year. So my bill was proactive, not waiting for a disaster, a climate disaster, but doing something proactively. I worked with Republicans that didn't want to vote for the bill, and I said, tell me, how is clean water a Democrat or Republican issue? And for my colleagues who represent rural areas, I said, do you realize that the well water in the areas that you represent are affected by forever chemicals also? I was able to get bipartisan votes on that legislation, and it is now the law of Illinois. But I have also been a candidate who has called out Republicans and called out moderate Democrats when they don't want to take votes on issues that require courage. I'll give you an example. 2023, I introduced legislation to make Illinois a sanctuary state for trans families. My own party, Senate Democrats, were not giving me an opportunity to bring this bill up for a vote. And I had to elbow my colleagues in internal meetings and say, look, I'm not going to take another picture with you at a pride parade and you say that you're an ally of the LGBTQ community and you won't move forward on this legislation. It shouldn't have taken that. But the reality is, if I wasn't in the room, it wouldn't have happened. And I think that is the approach that is needed in Congress right now, is people who can push back on hateful Republicans, who can elbow complacent Democrats who are out of touch, but who also can get into the weeds and actually get bills passed.
Yeah, and staying on this approach for a moment, whoever gets elected to this seat is still going to be one out of 435.
That's right.
in the House. And coming in as a freshman congressperson won't immediately have a lot of influence or clout or experience at the federal level. As a freshman congressperson, what are issues that you think you can actually make progress on in your first 2 years as you're kind of building that experience up?
Yeah. So right now we're looking at a scenario where we're going to be trying to push back on fascism. I personally would like to see Donald Trump impeached, convicted, thrown in prison. And I think that has to be the first order of business for me. If I win the seat, I'm really focused on that, and I'm really focused on abolishing ICE. I've said publicly that in my first 10 days of winning the seat, I would bring forward legislation to abolish ICE. What does that mean? It's not just a slogan. It means clawing back $170 billion that has been poured into ICE on July 4th. It means reappropriating those dollars into Medicaid, educational assistance programs, SNAPs, and all the other programs that have been gutted as a result of that. And then it means telling the truth about what ICE is, which is it is an agency that cannot be reformed. There are Democrats in Congress right now that have a reform mindset on an agency that brutally punched a man in the head at Asbury and Oakton Street last fall, an agency that kidnapped and killed several people on the streets of Chicago in 3 months of Operation Midway Blitz, including in my own neighborhood. And so that's the priority for me on day one. And I will do whatever it takes to make that happen. I'm one member out of 435. That means we're going to have to be really creative about how we make the case for the kind of bills that we want to pass, who we stand in coalition with. That is work I've done in the state Senate, standing with coalitions on the outside that can apply external pressure on colleagues so that they do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, even just recently, current Democratic leadership in Congress, including Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, have kind of wavered at times on their own approach to the DHS appropriations bill. Like,
Right.
what do you attach to it? You know, Coming into that kind of environment, do you feel that this agitation approach is going to be effective?
Yes, I do. I think that we need Democrats right now to be agitators because we are behind the eight ball. I'm tired of losing elections. I'm tired of watching Democrats run and not speak to the issues of working people who feel disillusioned and disenchanted, who are starting to vote for Donald Trump. This is why we lost the election in 2024. It's why we don't see the type of voter participation that we should. And so I think our energy and our approach has to change. I'm not saying every other Democrat has to do that. I'm saying I, as a candidate for Congress in the ninth district, that's my hallmark. And that's been very effective in the state Senate. And I think that energy is desperately needed in Congress right now. But it doesn't mean going in and throwing bombs and just, you know, attack everybody in the room and then ask for allies later. I'm very strategic about how we do this. But we can't go in acting like there's a house on fire and acting like there's somebody that forgot to put on an incense. I mean, that's the energy I see from Democrats in Congress right now. And it's a big part of why I decided to run is because we need a different sense of urgency and passion right now.
Yeah. So thinking about like bipartisanship, kind of looking for that, and working with moderate Democrats, where do you draw the line on where you're able to find compromise? Work within with people that are split from you,
Yeah.
and then where does the line get set on like I can't compromise on this and need to kind of stand on an issue?
Yeah. I love this question. So I think for me, what I've liked to say on the campaign trail is that I can work with anybody and I just point to my record in the state Senate. No one has passed 50 bills in 5 years. I'm very proud of the work I've done. And that's because I've really good at making allies, sitting out with my colleagues, figuring out how to craft legislation. When the cameras are not rolling, when the social media clicks are not happening, that is a skill set that I have and I've proven myself to be effective at it. But what I've also said is that I can't sit across the table and work with somebody and compromise with them and negotiate with them if they think I shouldn't exist. They think that my partner and I don't have the right to marry a same-sex couple, if they think that women should not have the right to bodily autonomy, if they think that trans people should be erased from the American healthcare system, I can't work with them. And I honestly can't be nice to those people either because those people are running and winning elections with a platform that espouses violence on specific identities. That's a big problem right now. That is a big part of how fascism gets bigger and bigger and eventually swallows all of us in its wake. And so I like to say as a candidate, I can do both. I can call out the BS. I can push back on the bigots like I've done in the Illinois Senate, but I can also work with Republicans and moderates and get things done. And that's those two things I think are the things that I bring as a candidate that I don't think anyone else in this field can do or has done.
So as I mentioned before, Jan Schakowsky, at the end of this term, will have represented the seat for 28 years.
Yeah.
Before her, Congressman Sid Yates represented it for 48 years.
Mhm.
If you do win, how long do you see yourself staying in this seat? And is there a point where, no matter how well an incumbent may be doing, it's time to turn it over and bring someone else new in?
Yeah, I don't plan to stand. If I win this primary, I don't plan to stay there for a generation. What I've said publicly is that on day one, I want to get moving on the things that this district needs. This district needs the next member of Congress for this district who comes after Jan Schakowsky to do something about the affordability crisis and now. Because this is the thing I hear about whether I'm in Crystal Lake knocking on doors, Hawthorne Woods, or Rogers Park, is people are complaining about the cost of prescription drugs. There's no path to retirement. Housing is out of reach. People are not even engaging with the healthcare system anymore. And so that has to be the first order of business. And we don't have a generation to work on these issues. We need solutions right now. And so like I have in the state Senate, I've gotten 50 bills passed in 5 years because I believe in using the role right now for the things that people need and the power that people have entrusted you to carry. I'm not waiting 10, 20 years to do all that. And honestly, the district doesn't have the margin of error on this right now, given the affordability crisis, given the very existential threat to our democracy that awaits us. We won't have 20 or 30 or 40, 50 years to have work on these issues.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to this in your last response, but your current state Senate district covers neighborhoods on the far north side of Chicago, but the ninth district, as it is right now, stretches all the way out to Crystal Lake, Algonquin, McHenry County. How do you, as a state senator in this area, just south here of Evanston, connect with voters in the far-flung areas of the district, in the ninth district, and how do you assure them that their priorities are going to be just as important and connect to the priorities of your current main area?
Yeah. Well, I think in my campaign for this district, I've shown that I prioritize the whole district, and so I campaign in every part of the district: McHenry County, Lake County, suburban Cook, Chicago, where I currently represent as a state senator. I'm really proud to have endorsements from McHenry County Board Member Gloria Van Hoff, Dee Darling, who is the president of the School Board of Cary, Illinois, which is in McHenry County in the ninth district. She's also the president of the National Organization of Women for McHenry County. I'm proud to have the endorsement of Evanston Alderman Matt Rogers, as well as former Alderwoman Cicely Fleming from the Ninth Ward, and then folks like Alderwoman Maria Hatton from the Rogers Park area. Listen, the reality is that for this district to have effective representation, the next person that represents us is going to have intentionality about doing that, because it's not enough to say you're going to represent the district and then people don't see you after election for 2 years. So what I've said on the campaign trail is that if I win this primary and become the next member of Congress, I want to have a field office in every part of the district: one for Chicago, one for Lake County, one for McHenry County. And the goal there would be for me to be in front of constituents regularly, where they see me at monthly town halls. They see our staff. They're able to come into a field office without traveling 50 miles, because this district is 70 miles from one point to the furthest perimeter. And I think, like I said, you need to be intentional about that. And the way I have campaigned and the way that I have crisscrossed the district, I think shows voters that I mean it when I say I intend to represent the entire district.
Yeah, so you've been in your current state Senate seat since 2021, initially being appointed. And then in the two cycles since then, you haven't faced a contested election until this one. You mentioned your record stacking up against others in the race, and some of your competitors do have longer tenures in different levels of office. How should Democratic voters weigh your record in this election, being the first time against other people, against those records of your opponents?
Yeah. Well, let's look back at this. So when I came to the state senate, I broke through a wall. Um, I went against the establishment. When I said to the powers that be that I was interested in serving as a state senator, I was told to pound sand. I was told to wait my turn, and that if somebody resigned from a lesser office, maybe the powers that be would give me a shot at serving in a lesser office. I thought that was repugnant. I thought that was so disrespectful, and I thought that that didn't meet the moment. And so I went ahead and I put my hat in the ring for the appointment. And I got a bunch of people in the community to organize forums. Indivisible organized a bunch of forums around that appointment. These have been backroom deals since the 1970s, these state legislative appointment sessions. And we upended the mold on that. And what happened is people heard what I was saying, the work that I had done in the community, and said, this is very much what our community needs right now in the state Senate. And that's how I became the first openly LGBTQ person to serve in the Illinois Senate, the first Ethiopian American to ever serve in either chamber of the state government, where I've been really effective. Now, the reality is that it took a lot for me to not be contested. It was not because I just lucked out. I put in the work. It's doing monthly town halls. It's having a really good newsletter that actually communicates real things to people and not just a bunch of boilerplate and a bunch of fancy photos. It is having a really good and competent staff that I took the time to hire and recruit. I didn't just let someone stuff my office with a bunch of machine hacks. That's how I have managed to serve 5 years in the state Senate, pass a lot of legislation, and not have contestation. But it's not because that's just how it was supposed to be. And I'm proud of that. I really am.
Yeah. So looking at the race now, most polling has shown you just at about fourth place, very much present. But per the most recent disclosure filings, you've entered 2026 at a significant cash disadvantage. What are you doing right now to reach voters, and what do you see as your path to victory?
Yeah. Well, I think the path to victory is spending a lot of time in the district, across the entirety of the district, and continuing to talk about my message around doing something about the affordability crisis, having authentic representation, and defeating fascism. I mean, those are the things right now that people are looking for. And I would add that I think people are looking for something different. people are not interested in electing the same types of Democrats who give us the same results. They're looking for somebody that can shake it up and who has shown that they know how to shake up the system the way I have in the state Senate. And even the way that I came to the state Senate is ample proof for voters. But let's talk about wealth and privilege. The reality is that I don't come from a wealthy or privileged family. I'm a working class candidate who uses public transit, who for 99% of my life until last year was a renter, where I grew up in public housing in this district. There are people who would say that, you should front load your campaign with a bunch of donations on day one. I didn't have that advantage, and I don't apologize for that. But what I have done is I've built a scrappy campaign where I have raised a significant amount of money for someone running for national office for the first time. And we've got enough money to effectively communicate our message to the voters that need to hear it. Will I be on TV every day? No. Will I raise millions of dollars in this campaign or take money from donors that are giving to APAC the way Laura Fine is or some of the others in this race? Don't have that and not don't want to do that. But what I have is a really good message, a really good story, and a genuine heart for service and a work ethic that I think makes us competitive in this primary and is precisely why I am a top tier candidate and polling in the top 3 or 4 candidates with 3 other people who have millions of dollars. I have a fraction of the money they have, and I'm running neck and neck with them right now.
And just as a follow up, you kind of mentioned this. Most, if not all, of the other kind of leading candidates that have stood out in this race are on video ads of some kind, whether it's TV, cable, broadcast, or socials, whatever it may be. Do you plan to roll out any ads in the coming days?
Yes, we have a very robust communications plan to communicate with our voters. It is very dynamic in terms of the different venues where people will hear our message. But yes, and we feel like it's a good message that people will remember and not sort of tune out.
Yeah. So as of yesterday, mail ballots are starting to go out to voters. Early voting has opened in Lake and McHenry counties. As voters are starting to make their choice in this race, what do you want them to keep in mind?
I want them to think about who is the person that you believe will really shake it up in Congress. I don't look like your typical member of Congress, and I symbolize everything Donald Trump is trying to erase right now. As a black candidate, as an LGBTQ candidate, as a working class candidate, as an effective lawmaker and an outspoken state senator, I would think is Donald Trump's worst nightmare. And so the day I take the oath of office is a different day in the Congress of the United States. And I would ask voters to really look at this field and ask themselves, who do you really think is going to make a difference and is not going to just be business as usual in Washington? I would offer that I'm that candidate, and I would also offer that what I've heard at doors is that's what people are looking for right now, and that's what people are looking for in this primary across racial and ethnic backgrounds, across socioeconomic backgrounds, across different religious and faith backgrounds is someone who can meet the moment, and I believe I can meet the moment.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you.